And no, the reason we sang that is not because you're all crazy.
Some of us are.
Okay, I dedicate this song to Tim. Willie Nelson, certainly one of the more iconic country musicians of all time, and maybe most of you know, maybe some don't, that he actually wrote that song. And Willie was a very interesting character. He's our metaphysical teacher for today. I don't know if you can see this. Actually, this is a painting of him I found. Thought it was brilliant, beautiful painting. But Willie had a very interesting career. And it started around 1956, and he was a singer-songwriter, and he ended up showing up in Nashville and making some connections with some people, became friends with some people, and became known as a pretty good songwriter. And it was around 1961 that he actually wrote the song Crazy, and according to lore or legend, or however you want to say it, he actually wrote the lyrics on the back of a bar napkin. I wonder what that would go for in a silent auction right now. Willie had just a very modest career up to that point, and even after the recording of Crazy by Patsy Cline that became her signature song, his career, it certainly took a jump, but it wasn't really as lucrative as you might think. Of course, the music business is so much different now, but even back then it was filled with its pitfalls. But he was finally given an opportunity to go on staff with RCA Records. And he started writing some songs for some other performers. And he was himself a performer, but not really someone that you would really go out of your way to go see. He wasn't really a showman of his own right. He was more of a songwriter and a backup singer and a bass player and a guitar player. And he had a very decent career. But as things go and times became a little stagnant for him, and RCA was getting a little bit frustrated with him because he decided, or they decided that he just wasn't writing good enough songs. There was a guy who wrote one of the most iconic songs of all time, and he wasn't good enough. He wasn't. It was like a classic example of, what have you done for me lately, Willie? And this caused Willie a lot of friction, a lot of heartache, a lot of frustration in his life, and he just was getting fed up. Yeah, you guys ever been fed up with something? You ever just get so tired of something you think, something's got to change, something's got to give, something's got to move me past this experience? Well, for Willie, fate took a turn when, in Christmas Day of 1970, his house in Nashville burnt to the ground. And Willie, I think, felt sort of relieved because he had a choice at that moment. He had a choice. He could probably have rebuilt a house or moved into another one, kept things the way they were, moved through his life uninspired. But Willie took it as a sign that it was time to leave Nashville, that it was time to move on, time to let things that had been well and great for him be in the past, to basically move from Nashville to Austin, Texas. He was originally from Texas. And he got to Austin, Texas, and he had decided he was going to retire from the music business. 1970, going to retire. I'm done. I'm out of here. I've had my successes. I've written a great song. I've written a number of hit songs for a number of different people. I'm going to hang my hat up. But he ran across a club in Austin at the time. It was called the Armadillo. And the Armadillo was a club that was used to hosting some musicians that were of the eclectic nature. They were a little bit out of the mainstream of what the music industry was looking for. The music industry was looking for the let's insert this person that we can dress up in makeup and create this persona of this person, and then we'll give them a couple of hit songs. And Willie was just never into that. But he found this place called the Armadillo, and he just started showing up there to take part in some of the jams that they had going on at the Armadillo. And as fate would have it, he would run into different people. The Talking Heads were there. A lot of different acts went through there in the early days of the Armadillo. And the Armadillo is where he met Waylon Jennings. So he's floating around in Armadillo land, and he gets inspired. And he decides that he feels like he wants to write again. He wants to do something really unique and really very, very true to himself. And so fast forward 5 years, and he starts working on an album called The Red-Headed Stranger. And this was Willie's signature album. This was the album that came out that had the song Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, which is still a real big standard that's really synonymous with Willie Nelson. If you think of Willie Nelson, you think of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. Yes, he's had a number of other hits, but The Red-Headed Stranger was one of the most interesting albums that I personally had ever heard, because as I listen to music, I was always listening to, you know, how well something was produced, how well the background vocals were, how well it was mixed. And I knew that this was Willie Nelson's signature album, so I decided I was going to get it one day, and I listened to it, and I was really flabbergasted at how plain and simple this album was. It was like it was recorded in his front living room. And if you listen to it today, if you're a music lover, if you want to go out to YouTube or whatever, or you can download it from Amazon, I'm sure. This album is so basically simple and so pure that it was stripped of all its commercialism. It was stripped of all of the pretty mixing. It was stripped of all of the pretty voices. It was as raw as you will ever hear an album recorded. And the album ended up selling about 2 million copies. And it put Willie Nelson on the map of not being the guy who wrote Crazy, but of this artist and this outlaw country movement of Waylon and Willie in Lukenbach, Texas, of a guy who was instrumental in helping farmers overcome their challenges, a guy who was used in the movie Honeysuckle Rose, On the Road Again. Willie recreated himself. But before he recreated himself, he had to lose himself. He had to lose the picture of who he was in his mind. The fire had helped him. There was a quote I came around in relation to this. Change is inevitable. Whether it's for good or decay depends on the individual. In his case, it was definitely for the good. I'm sure he chuckles when he hears his name in the news about his income tax problems, you know, thinking, wow, you know, my personal business is in the news. By the way, and just so you know, I thought I would just a little tidbit of information about Willie, since he's our teacher this month. He'll be 80 years old on April 30th of this month. So we remember Willie Nelson not for the greatness that he was, but the greatness that he became of his own self. Crazy is an afterthought. Oh, by the way, he's the guy who wrote Crazy. But he didn't let that success stop and define him. He was able to let that vision of himself go and move into a greater experience into his life. So Mark called me last month, and he says, Chris, we've got some changes that are going on. We're going to be moving into a new location. They're going to be selling this building, and we're going to have to find a new place to live or a new place to worship. That's it. Yeah, you all are moving to Topeka. Well, at least it's not Lawrence, right? But immediately I thought of this story about somebody who had to change almost instantaneously. There was really not much time to think about this. Your house is burned down one day, you're gone the next. Not that this place is burning down, but it's certainly going to become unavailable to this community that we know and this church that we know as Unity Church of Manhattan. And there's probably some attachments to this room. There's probably many of fond memories that you have of this room. And there's also the opportunity now to envision what we want as this faith community moves forward. What are some of the positive things that we can bring with us from this experience? What are some of the things that we can let go of? Willie did not let go of his songwriting. He let go of his idea of who he was as a musician. We as a faith community do not have to let go of the fact that we are a faith community. We can now claim a new space. We can claim the right and perfect place that supports and allows us to leave our setup every week. We can claim a space that allows us to have more interactive PowerPoint. We can claim a space that is supportive of the youth that will attend this community. We can claim and we can create with our minds, if we are giving the truth principles their true worth, we can claim our good right now, right here. We can manifest that exactly which we desire, whatever we expect. What do we expect as a faith community? Some may be concerned, well, oh gosh, we can't afford it. Or, oh, it doesn't, oh, we have to have this or we can't do this. I'm sure there's some doubts out there. There's some worries. There's concerns that may be there. But I'm telling you right now, if we believe in the principles of unity, we can create exactly what is needed to support everyone in this community. By claiming it, by affirming it, by holding it and manifesting it in our thoughts and our prayers and our actions, we put feet to our vision. And we open our minds to the possibility of the right and perfect space. So together, I want to affirm as a community, I am now ready to receive the right and perfect space for the Unity Church of Manhattan. Let's say that together. I am now ready to receive the right and perfect space for the Unity Church of Manhattan. Change is not always easy. Change is painful, can be, also be liberating. I have changed in my past. A similar story on a much smaller scale to Willie, but back in 1999, I was living in Lewisville, Texas, a little town just north of Dallas. And I had recently gotten reconnected with the Catholic faith. my children were real young, and I decided that I wanted to have them involved in some kind of a faith community. And because my wife was Catholic at the time, we decided that we'd go to this Catholic church, and we went in. And the priest at this Catholic church, his name was Father Ken Robinson. And Father Ken Robinson is, to this day, is one of the best speakers I've ever heard in my life. His masses and his homily was just enthralling. I could not wait for Sunday morning for somebody to go listen to that just moved me off of my seat. I just loved every word that came out of that guy's mouth. But we had a decision to make. We were living in Texas, and all of our family was back in Florida. We had a decision. Do we want to stay in Texas and keep this distance and keep our children this far away from their grandparents? Or would we like to move back and allow that connection to be manifested so they can have that connection? And I'll be honest with you, not that I did not want them to have that connection. I was heartbroken because I really liked the Dallas area. It was a really cool area. It was filled with a lot of positive people. The only problem with it, there was a lot of Cowboy fans. But nonetheless, it was a really awesome place to live. And even my wife liked it, but she had such a connection with her grandmother, and I had had such a connection with my grandfather. We knew that this connection was important. And so I decided to give notice on my job, and we decided to relocate back to Florida. And I was heartbroken. I was leaving a job that I liked. I was leaving an area that I liked. And I was going back to a place that, in some ways for me, was not to my liking. But I did it for my kids. Who doesn't do things for their children, right? So I went back, and over the next 6 years, I experienced the success in my music business like I never had. I became very successful working with a lot of entertainment agents all over the state. And had I not opened myself to the possibility, I wouldn't have experienced that. I would not have produced my first 2 CDs. I would not have received some of the recognition that I had received for the recordings of those CDs. So I was able to move past the hurt and open myself to new possibilities of creating something that I had never created before. And it was a blessing to me. Even the Fillmores that we look up to and look to for guidance and wisdom, Charles was a real estate developer. And there are still some communities in Pueblo, Colorado, that were put together and actually named after the Fillmores. But it wasn't meant to be. Things were such that his wife's health were so hard on her that they had to find a place to be. Strangely enough, Kansas City was not really on the top of the list, but Myrtle had a dream that she dreamed that this fountain was flowing from Kansas City and that she had to be there in Kansas City to receive her healing. The hardships of the Fillmores are well documented in the early annals of Unity. There was a story where Charles had a bill to pay and somebody came to his door and he says, "I don't have the money, but I have a rich father." So not only do we draw our spiritual inspiration from the Fillmores, but also from our way shower and the story of Jesus and the disciples. The disciples had a very significant choice to make after the passing or after the ascension of Jesus. They could have folded up tent, closed up shop, and said, "Well, that was fun. That was a really great experience. let me go back to tending my net and catching some fish and savoring these good memories that I've had. Or they decided to carry the message forward. They decided to go ahead and use the inspiration that they had to preach, proselytize, heal, inspire, encourage others. It was by losing Jesus that they found themselves. They found that they were realizing the power that they had within them to accomplish all of the things that he said that they could do, and even greater things. I would say that their decision was probably the most significant in all of Christianity, because they were the first ones to believe. They were the first ones to say, yes, we can do this. Without them, Christianity probably would have been a faint mark on the history of humankind. But 12 men decided to step forward and carry it forward when there seemed to be no way. Change is not always fun, but I have to believe, and if we're believing that, as our unity vision or statement said, that there's only one presence and one power in this universe and in our life, God the good omnipotent. There is only one presence and one power. So all of the changes that we're going through are all part of that power. And we get to claim that now. We get to exercise our faith. We get to stand in the truth of this statement. Reminds me of the story of the guy who had a wheelbarrow. He was a guy who would go across the country and he would do these exhibitions on a high wire. And he tied up this high wire across this ravine, and he took the wheelbarrow and he pushed it across the ravine, and he came back across the ravine. And by this time there was a crowd of people there, and they said, do it again. So he does it again. He walks across the ravine and he comes back across the ravine. They said, this is amazing. He says, but how many people really believe that I can do this? And they all raised their hand. We just saw you do it. He says, okay, well then get in the wheelbarrow. It's time to get in the wheelbarrow. It's time to cross that divide. It's time to visualize what this community can be. It's no longer out there in the future. The time is now. The time for taking action and getting in the wheelbarrow and crossing and experiencing something that's scary. Do we have the faith? I believe we do. I believe this community is a very powerful community, and that these changes in this new community, this new space, is only going to bring good. You never know what sign might be out. You might be in a different corner and somebody drives by and they see the sign Unity Church, and they may have been looking for one, and it may be somebody who has gifts to share with this community that never knew you existed. It could be somebody who is really desperate and who has been beaten down by a traditional religion and needs a source of hope, needs a belief in God that is all-loving and all-encompassing. We all know that change, all things work together for good. So this is good, and we're taking this opportunity to claim our change now. So we're going to go into a meditation, and then we're going to sing a song out of meditation. I invite all of you to close your eyes and open your mind. Right now, we hold the vision of the new space, of the new place that will host the church, the people of Unity Church of Manhattan. Right now, we're walking in the door of this new community. We're flipping on the lights. We see the chairs already set up. We see the altar. We see the pulpit. We see the piano. We see the space for the choir, the music team. And off to the left or to the right, however you see it in your mind, there's a hallway that leads back into the area where all of the classrooms are. There's a classroom for the infants, for the toddlers. There's a class for the young school-age children, for the YOUers, the Uniteens, young adults of Unity. There's a library and a bookstore that has resources for those seeking this expression of the truth. There are offices and there are support staff that work 5 days a week. And outside you walk out and there is a huge parking lot that holds hundreds of cars. There's a playground, an activity center. And we know that whatever it is that we're holding, whether this is your vision or you may have a slightly different vision, we know that it's all good, that this vision will manifest as we as a collective consciousness are led and able to discern. And we hold our vision and our individual ideas of this vision in the sacredness of the silence, knowing that it is done in the silence.